Cool. All right, so we are gonna do another let's look at. I'm hoping to do more of these going forward because I did one and it was really fun. So I'm just gonna keep trying them out with different games until I get bored of doing it. So with that in mind, I was thinking it'd be fun to do one for October, specifically the theme, which is Halloween, because Halloween is all of October. And so I decided to pick up Dread. The thing with this one is it's a game I've actually played before, so this isn't going to be my first impressions of it, but it is a game that I already had available, and I'm thinking of a few other themed ones that I'm interested in doing as the month goes on, but I'm going to give this a shot, see what it's like. Dread is a game that I really enjoy. It's actually probably one of my favorites with some notable caveats. So without that, I think we can hop in and get started. So here's the cover. It's nice and simple, I would say. Like, it's not flashy graphics or anything, but I quite enjoy it for that. It's straightforward. I know what I'm getting. It really quickly sets the theme with a bloody handprint on the front. So that's really good. I like that. So as far as table of contents, this one is probably going to be a little bit quicker than the last look at that I did, because in this game there's not a whole lot of rules. A lot of what this PDF is going to be, like for example chapter 2 here, is briefly the rules, so it's going to be quick. There's not going to be that much going on there. This game tells you more about the theme and some of the stuff going on there, and has a bunch of suggestions for that. We're going to look a little bit at that, but I enjoy a lot of the design in here. I think it's pretty modern, and I think the book does a really good job of guiding you through that. So let's hop in. So very first thing is it has a good warning on here. It should be said that Dread is not necessarily for everyone. The main purpose of any game is to have fun. Like a good game of Truth or Dare, Dread should make you uncomfortable from time to time. If this does not sound like fun, then please do not play. So this is a game where I think safety tools are really good, because it is a horror type game. I think they could have mentioned that, and that would have been better if they'd included that in here, but there's other options to get a hold of that as players too. Whoops. I'm going to turn that off. I also quite enjoy about the way they've set this game up is the beginning of each of these starts with these sort of prompts that really get you into the setting. So I'm just going to read part of this one out. Maybe the second paragraph here, because I think it does a good job. I was about to relay the good news to the Colemans and the Reverend when I saw their faces blanch as they stared at me, rather just beyond me. That was when I realized that it wasn't Lucy outside, but her reflection against the darkened window. Soon I would learn that both the police and I were correct. That was Lucy's body in the ditch, and she did indeed find her way home. So really quickly, it sets a really good atmosphere for whoever's reading, and I like that. And it gives you just enough context to sort of have a moment of, I guess, horror. So for basics, I think we can skip over this. Yeah, so let's look at some of the different parts of Dread. So I think Dread is a more popular game in the gaming community, but we're going to look at the different stuff anyways. So Dread starts out with a tower of non-copyrighted, uninfringible blocks, wooden blocks. And this is made into a tower. It's a pile of 3 on each level, alternating directions, 18 levels high. Oh, here it is. That can be purchased commercially under the brand name Jenga. So they actually had the brand name in here. The one thing that I'll say about the tower, which is like my opening statement, this is weird in that your skill in this game is directly linked to your dexterity as a person, and that can not always be great, especially from an accessibility perspective. But I think the game does offer some suggestions instead of a tower, which we'll get to. So in addition to players, you're going to need a sturdy flat surface, scratch paper, blah, 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 blah. Just basic stuff that you need. The ambiance. When you're ready to play, you'll want to set aside a sufficient amount of time to maintain a horrific atmosphere. You should begin with the proper environment. A dark, quiet place will work best. So I enjoy that they talk about how to set the mood for this game. I like that this book is laid out in a very sort of start to finish way. Like, it's very natural to read. Talks about how a game can take 4 more hours, so you need to plan for it. Yeah. And then it talks a little bit about the book. I don't think we need to get into this. And I think we can keep going. Cool. So they got a nice glossary here. That's good. I don't think we need to go into that. So briefly, the rules. And the rules in this game are actually pretty straightforward. Basically, if you want to do something that is questionable on if it's going to succeed or not, you pull a block. And if it gets pulled, you succeed. If the tower falls over, you die. That's the gist of it. Before you, for those of you who are new to Dread, before you play, there's some preparations that you have to do. One of the players has to be the host or the GM, and they're going to be providing a framework and coming up with a story. The other players will come up later, but essentially what they do is you have to come up with your character. Usually there's a questionnaire that you go through, and there's a few different parts there. So it says here, once the host has had time to prepare and the players have finished their character questionnaires, you'll be ready to begin the game. Find a flat surface, blah, 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 you're ready to go. So there's a bit of prep to do. I think the prep, in my experience, has been really engaging. What I've done is I'll just send out the questionnaire to the different players. I'm like, hey, you need to fill this out to start the game. Do this when you want. Let me know if you have any questions. And we'll take a look at one of the questionnaires at the end. I think they're further down. So next up, it talks about the metaphor of the tower. And the tower is, I think, really good at setting a mood for this. So in order to play Dread, you're going to have to assemble the tower both metaphorically and physically. The latter emotion is a vital part of the formula as the former. Without hope, horror is only despair. To create dread, you must be able to balance that sickening cold swimming in your gut with the glimmering chance of survival laying just at the tip of your outstretched fingers. Every significant action in Dread is resolved through a metaphor of this balance, even if the elements of horror and hope have not yet shown themselves into the story. This is accomplished through the tower. At the beginning of the game, the physical tower should be placed upon your flat surface in a spot all players can agree on. You'll want it easily accessible but not precarious, so not so that people can just accidentally bump it over. Everyone except the host will be able to reach it. If you're playing with less players, it does some stuff. So the game begins. The host is going to set the scene as if they were telling a story, and this game, I find, is really cinematic. That's a really good way to put it, I think. The game is very cinematic. There's a lot going on in that regard. You have a lot of scening, framing. I think when I've played this game, I try and get the group as involved as possible. It was like, what does this shot look like? And use a lot of that filmography terms that you would hear. There's no formal structure to this part of the game, which will most likely be the majority of it. The host has complete control over everything in the story except the other player characters. So that's pretty good. It just tells you explicitly how the narrative control exists. The success, failure, oops, I missed a part. The players may, and in fact should, interrupt to describe the actions taken by the characters. They have complete control over their own characters, but cannot control anything beyond the actual intention to act. The success, failure, and consequence of the actions are up to the host and the tower. So again, it's just talking about how to play a role-playing game. Then here on the right column, it has this really great part that I quite enjoy. It has this little to-do list on preparing for the game. So it says, preparing for the game, decide who's your host. The host should prepare notes, unique questionnaires. Players fill out their questionnaires. Players should introduce their characters. And you stack the tower. So little things like this I find are really helpful. When I've played the game, sometimes I found these a bit difficult to, these sort of cheat sheets a bit difficult to find on the spot. But the intention is nice. Oops. Cool. And then it goes into resolving conflicts. So this is going to explain more of how to use the tower. Well, many of the things the characters do will be clearly possible. Some of them may not. Anytime a character attempts to do something like that, the player must pull a block from the tower. And that's the core of this game. When you actually play this game, I find that the Jenga tower, or the non-copyrighted wooden block tower, whatever, is really good at simulating these skill tests. You have very few mechanics. And I think that is good if you enjoy a narrative game. If you're looking for crunch, this is not the game. There's literally no math in this game. So I'm just going to read the notes here of what it says at a high level for pulling. You have to use one hand at a time, so at typical Jenga rules, and then you place it on top. One thing that I like is when you're doing pulls, the blocks can represent different parts of what you're doing, because we might have to pull more than one block. Usually I'll do 1 to 3 depending on where we are in the game. And so you can sort of say, this pull represents this person succeeding at this part, or this pull represents this person succeeding at this part. And something that I've really enjoyed to do as a GM is you narrate very slowly and meticulously what's happening as the player pulls. So as the person is like pulling the block out, I'll be like, and as they move towards the trap door to get it open, and it's very dramatic in that fashion. Non-copyrighted wooden block tower. It was a good game. Another thing that's really important for Dread is you can always abandon the pull. At any time during this process, the player is allowed to abandon the pull. If you abandon the pull, the character fails at the action that the pull represented. If the tower collapses because of a pull that was abandoned, the character is still removed from the game. So keep in mind, if it falls, you're going to get removed from the game, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit here. So it talks about pulling the block. It talks about collapsing the tower, which we've really already gone over. The one thing that I've heard that people get a little bit stuck on is, oh, how am I supposed to get ready to remove someone from the game at any moment? And I have found that while that can sometimes be tough, there's a really easy solution as far as like narrative stuff, where the power goes out and when it comes back on, someone's missing. I found that, I mean, that works every time. It does have a nice little section here on expanding the characters. And this section talks about how once you are playing, if you're not sure about something that a character might have, you can pull to expand the character's sort of knowledge set, which I like. But that's sort of the gist of it. Oh, and then this is excellent. The game addresses the fact that it can be tough to have a character leave, just to come up with it on the spot, by giving you this nice list here. And some of them are a bit more loose, I would say. Like one of them says here, regress to a childlike state, so maybe the person becomes catatonic or unconscious. Basically, they get removed in some way. Okay, moving forward, this is one thing that I also quite like in Dread. There's this thing called the sacrifice. So if you've ever played Jenga, the tower gets to a point where it's like, okay, I don't think I can physically succeed at pulling blocks from it. There's going to be times where that happens. What you can do is, rather than lose your character just outright, you can have one last desperate option. And I like this because it adds a nice bit of choice to the game, although I can't remember a case where someone's used it. So I don't actually have experience with this, but I really like the sound of it. So if a player deliberately knocks a tower over, like if they think, I can't do this, I'm just going to push it over, the character is going to succeed in a dramatically appropriate way, but then they get removed. So it's like your heroic last-ditch effort. And honestly, that is better than going out, without a heroic effort in the end. So that's always good. Here it goes on and talks about complex and difficult tasks. We don't need to get into that. That's essentially the idea that you can pull more than one time and why you might do that. And then it also goes into conflict between player characters. This one I haven't really ran into. I find that player conflict does come up though in this game, because it's not like everyone's necessarily on the same team. I've definitely played games where there's been like seeds of doubt put into the group intentionally through the questionnaires, but it has some suggestions here. It is recommended that this method be used, should not be used for most conflicts between characters, especially verbal ones. When a character tries to do something rash or violent to another, the other can usually avoid it. If a player doesn't want the action to be avoided, they can risk one or more pulls from the tower. So the aggressor is essentially responsible for doing pulls. The player of the target must either accept the action or pull to defend. This goes on until it's sort of like a tiebreaker until someone says, no, I don't want to pull anymore, or what have you. And this is dangerous because it will make the tower get really wobbly really quick, and that's not fun if it's still the beginning of the evening. Cool. Something that's really cool about the design of this game, or the layout rather, is they have good pictures in here to add some vibe, but they also have these lines at the bottom of the page that I feel like add a nice ambiance to what's here, and I enjoy that. It just goes on and talks more about the game. I think that really sums it up. Obviously it goes into more detail, but the thing I like about the way Dread is designed is that it essentially gives you everything you need as far as rules really early. Like, it's very simple rule set, and it has a bit of explanation and guidance for players and the host on how to go through some of the trickier situations, like what happens if people want to have character conflict like we saw. So I enjoy that. I enjoy when games put in effort to sort of expanding upon how things work, but keeping it simple so that they have lots of room to do that. So this section goes on and talks about the character questionnaires. So the player's characters stand at the center of any Dread game. Just like the main character in any novel or movie, the plot revolves around them. So back to the filmography stuff, which is awesome. Therefore, the player characters are often far better defined than any of the other characters involved in the story. So this one just goes on and talks about the questionnaire, and I like how it has the summary in the bottom. I'll probably look at this a little bit more. So a good questionnaire will provide the following information about what the character is capable of, what they're not capable of, a hook that invests the player into the character, that one's important, and a way to tie the character into the plot of the story. it's really good to have all the characters involved in the story, and it has this great follow-up here, a way for the characters to tie the character to the other player characters. So basically you have all the essential links. There's a lot of games that don't include this explicitly, and I find that you can run into some really awkward situations when everyone isn't nicely connected together. Lastly, and this is some more fantastic mood setting, it goes back to the theme, the duties of a questionnaire and a reason for the character to hope. I like that a lot. I think it really says a good chunk about what they're trying to accomplish with this game. This is my favorite game that does mood setting through the actual product that they provide. So it goes on and talks about how to create a questionnaire. In my experience, creating a questionnaire is really tough. It takes a lot of creative thought, and it's not something you can just like whip up. I found a lot of success in looking at the other questionnaires in the game, because it has some near the end, and sort of cannibalizing them, taking them apart, putting them back together, and then essentially applying it to your setting. But it does give this really great list here that says what are your habits, what are your weaknesses, and you ask questions that answer that. But we're gonna see in a second that a lot of these are asked in a way that are leading, and that leading question is so key and critical to Dread. I find that's probably the toughest part about being the host, is if you're trying to come up with new questions. This has a fair bit more to it than I realized from hearing about it in a couple actual play podcasts. It does have more to it. Like, yes, there's the tower, but there's things around it that just sort of come together really naturally, but they add so much to the game, and I think help. When you play Dread, you can feel the game propelling you and the story forward, and I love that it comes up with that momentum. So it goes on here. The most efficient way to get to the core of a character is to offer at least one intrusive question. Talks about an incredible hook, and then it has some examples here. Why are you married if you aren't in love? Who else knows you are a fraud? And you just like leave it totally open. Let the players fill it in with their imagination. And that way, when you're writing these questionnaires, again, the game comes with some, you can focus on themes like betrayal or betrayal is the one that comes to my mind off the top of my head, but you can focus on themes instead, which is nice. At the very end of each questionnaire, you get to the last question, and all it is what is your name? I really like that because it's so stylistically distinct to Dread. The character name is at the end of the questionnaire, and there's so much nuance there to what that means, because we see so many character sheets where your character name is at the top, and it's like, I don't know what my character's name is. I don't even know what they're like yet. So it's a nice little thing that they did to essentially piece it together. It has this good point here, which I like. If the character doesn't want to be in the game, the player might as well topple the tower and be done with it. So it's really talking about reasons why you want to be in the game, and that's cool. Something that's great about this section is, like, a character questionnaire is pretty straightforward, but it tells you how to do it and what the point is, and having that in a game adds a lot. So it has a sample questionnaire. We're not going to look at... Actually, you know what? Let's look at this one because the other ones I don't want to spoil. So it has one question here. Before the apocalypse, what job did you hold at a .com company? And what did you enjoy the most about it? How did you think the others treat... Or how do you think the others treat you differently because you were the youngest in the group, other than the child? This question does a really good job of setting stuff up. It sets up the fact that you are treated differently, and you are the youngest in the group other than the child. Who's the child? That might be another character. It might be something that comes up later in the questionnaire. Lots of open-ended stuff. And something that, again, I really like about Dread, and I wish more games had this, Dread has the design decision that you don't come into the game with your own character. You are prescribed a role, and as a player, you make it your own. And there's not enough games that say, I want you to come into this setting with this character. I think that is a very undervalued resource as far as how to make your games engaging. So many games who has had the D&D party where each person comes with their own backstory, and you as a GM are like, what do I do with this? What am I supposed to do? Whereas I think a lot of games, including D&D games, could be, okay, everyone, I want to run a story where we have a ranger who is the leader of this town. We have their partner. We have someone who is linked to some prophecy, and you basically prescribe what you want the roles to be. D&D doesn't come with tools for that. You kind of have to get them from other places. Dread has tools in this questionnaire, and I like that a lot. Let's take a look at some of the other questions. When you have trouble sleeping, what pleasant memory do you focus on? This tells you your character has trouble sleeping. Why do they have trouble sleeping? That's open-ended. What pleasant memory do you focus on? This tells you about how the character manages this, and then you also create a pleasant memory. I think it really comes together nicely. At the end of the questionnaire, again, I mentioned it asks you, what is your name? It has some suggestions on how to answer the questions. The first one's really good. Assume the question ends with a few more and why or how questions. When I'm writing the questionnaires, I like to sometimes explicitly include that, but a lot of times as players, they'll fill that in anyways. Cool. And then just give some sample answers. It has some ideas on how to play your character, which I think is mostly etiquette stuff. I'm not going to read through that. Yeah, we don't need to go through a lot of that. Cool. So here's where the game jumps in and addresses probably one of the biggest concerns I think people would have with this game. Oh wait, no, this is not that section. This one is talking about Dread characters don't have to end when the story ends. Many of them can offer more than a single night's distraction. So this talks about how you can play a series of stories. Yeah, we don't need to get into that. One thing that's kind of tough is when you're playing a Dread game, you want to focus on pacing of the game. Pacing because you don't want someone to be out of the game before the evening is half over. Like they don't want to sit there doing nothing for half the evening. What you want to do is have one pull here and there, I would say, for the first half of the game. Just let them succeed on things. Once you have your sort of middle of the evening break, that's when I feel like you really want to put on pressure. Start asking for 2 pulls at a time, 3 pulls at a time. Start making it more dangerous. Once the tower has fallen, that is when you like get really aggressive. Everything is 2 or 3 pulls, frequently happening all the time. You essentially want to have the first disappearance or first death of the game set the tone that, okay, things are going and they're not stopping. The roller coaster has begun. So it talks about how to host a dread game. I really like this section because it's your GM tips. This is how you play the game and how you can succeed at it. Every host has their own style, which makes it chapter on hosting rather difficult thing to write here. There's no right way to do this, but here's some of the wrong ways. This one is really great. Don't sit near the tower. Don't do it. Don't go near the tower. Nothing happens in the game if you knock it over, but the story will grind to a violent halt. If this does happen, rebuild the tower and ask for some pulls. Yeah, don't sit near the tower. It's super awkward if the host knocks the tower over. Don't cheat the other players. Well, this is good. I think this addresses some of the player versus host mindset that you might get in a game. But this game requires a lot of trust. Don't monopolize the story. Ask the other players about the characters and what they're up to. Make sure they're active participants. The players in this game are really going to contribute a lot to the story. It's generally all about the players. Don't let any single player dominate the story. Just another good tip. And then don't go easy on them. This one is good because in this game, they're successful if they pull from the tower. That's it. You can throw really hard things at them as long as they pull from the tower, they succeed. So that adds some drama to it, and I think that's fun. Don't be unreasonable. Don't let humor overtake the horror. Don't suppress the humor either. I think in a horror game, humor is really important. I think the three parts you see in most horror things, as far as tabletop games, is you have the horror, you have hope, and you have humor. Horror, because that's the genre of the game, but you can't have horror all the time, always happening. Otherwise, people get fatigued by it, which is why you have hope. Hope keeps people going through the horror. And the third thing, humor, is important because humor is a coping mechanism, and that coping mechanism can be really important when you're playing a game like this. It basically fills it in and gives you a chance to break away from the precarious balance between horror and hope. It lets you breathe for a moment and come at things with a bit of laughter. Oh, perfect. This is the section on pacing. I thought for a second it didn't have this, but it does. This section just talks about how you want to make sure that you're properly pacing the game so that a lot of the pulls and the action are happening near the end. It talks a little bit more about different things on here. We don't really need to go into that. Cool. Now it talks about some of the players or some of the things that you might run into. One of them is players that won't pull. There will be players that refuse to pull. This has happened. I've ran into this. The goal of the game is not to have your characters to survive, but to tell a compelling story. And I've had people who think, yeah, I can win this game by just never doing anything and passing it off to other people. My recommendation would just be don't play with those people. It talks a little bit about that here. Without the risk involved in pulling, there's nothing compelling in the character's personal story. When you have a player who seems to shy away from the tower, you will want to do something about it. And this is great. It talks about the problem, what it looks like, and how to solve it. There are a number of ways to go about this, but we recommend that you gently encourage the player to make pulls. So no manipulation at the table, no sort of, I guess, backhanded suggestions or any of that stuff. You very honestly just communicate with them, and I like that it spells that out. Because, again, this is a horror game. It requires a lot of trust, and building that trust is important. So that's why there's things like open communication, good stuff like that. The game really hits the nail on the head. The game is never about the host versus the players. So just great to have that in here. I like that. And then it goes on, it talks about dead ends, playing your characters, more advice, playing the environment. It's great to see all these sections in here. I like that. It goes on to do how to create a dread game. This one, like I mentioned, creating characters is surprisingly tough. I found that that is one of the trickier parts. And I recommend if anyone is trying to make a dread game, you really dive into this section and try and understand it as much as possible, because it's going to have some good stuff in here. We're probably going to skip over this just because we don't need to talk too much about that, but it's a really great resource. I'm just seeing if there's any highlights in here that I want to mention. Yeah, so it talks about theming, character questionnaires. Theming is really important. I like that. And then the content of the books changes a bit. We're halfway through the PDF, and the next few sections is just about the different types of games that you can have. You can have a suspense game, and it talks about how to do this, how to lay it out, how those pieces interact. It talks about the supernatural game. This one's cool. I like this. Has a few different parts here. The mad game, so madness. Madness is a staple of horror stories. It talks about how madness works, how to build that, how to interact with it, which is fun and exciting. It goes on, it talks about the morale game. This is the game about making decisions that are gray and not obvious. Hey, welcome, Maria. I'm just looking at Dread right now. It's a game that I'm super familiar with and I like. But I had it ready and wanted to do more of these let's look at kind of videos. This is not a game that's going to be very soft and fluffy. This is probably similar to, well, not dissimilar, but it has a lot of the spooky drama that y'all have in Urban Shadows, I would say. So this chapter goes and talks about the morale game, how to build that up as a host, what you want to do there. And then there's also the mysterious game. Again, just another theme that it talks about. Hosting mysteries can be tremendous fun, but they're also some of the most complex plots to manage. That I like that it starts off with a warning, because as good as mysteries are, it's really tough for people to notice those like tiny details to put it together, and then plot holes become a really big thing. So one thing that I like to do when there's any mystery involved, as far as like who was the murderer or things like that, I essentially leave it open-ended. And I've done this in the past where there was a scenario, everyone got together, there was a murderer, we didn't know who it was or what the context was, but essentially the way it was played is the first character whose tower fell down, or if the first person to knock down a tower and have their character go out, they didn't go out in a way that involved death or anything. They went out in sort of a mysterious way, and then I bring them back later and say, hey, your character is actually the murderer, and they're back and they want more revenge or something like that. And that's usually a very exciting dramatic climax. If possible, while I'm at the table after the character goes out of the scene, I'll text the player and say, hey, think of reasons why you want revenge with a group or something. And it gives them something really engaging to do as the game plays out and sort of get ready for that. Also, if you do the surprise murderer thing, make sure to give them weapons and stuff so that they're well equipped for the final showdown. So here it talks about, actually I think it does this completely right, a murderer among them. So what if you want one of the player's characters to be a murderer? This is a neat trick that sows the seeds of paranoia and is a crop that your players will be reaping for games to come if done right. However, be sure that you don't overdo it. It may be fun to pit the players against each other once in a while, but if it happens too often, the focus of the game shifts from horror to who can pluck the most blocks from the tower. If you're going to set one of the player's character up for murder, start the questionnaire. You can be very upfront about it, letting them know the instant they read the questionnaire. This way you allow the player the time to plot and mastermind their maneuver. Okay, so the game actually suggests that you just pick one. Later on in some stuff, I know that it talks about the other strategy where you leave it ambiguous and you don't pick one, which I think is fun and cool. Next, it talks about how to run the gory game. This is a game where I wish that the designers had done a better job of including safety tools, because this is where I can see a lot of things like X cards and lines and veils coming up, especially if people are more sensitive to that kind of stuff. Same with all the other ones, but for me, this one would be particularly bothering. I assume that this talks a bit about that, but if I remember correctly from what I've seen before, it doesn't have like there's no section here. Oh, okay, it does have something. So I think it could do it better, but let's see what it says. Once again, we highly recommend you come to an understanding with your players before using the tricks in this chapter. In particular, there will be acts so vile they will distract from the enjoyment of the game. Even worse, they might cause problems between friends playing the game. There are, and we're going to stop reading that. Yep. So this game could have done a better job of handling safety tools, because yeah, there's stuff in there that I wouldn't even want to say on stream. So we're just going to skip that. In the appendix, it has alternatives to the tower. I wish they had a slightly better job of this, or done a slightly better job here. If I remember correctly, it's essentially a stack of squares and you draw from them. And if you draw the wrong one, let's take a look in here. So during the game, when you're asked to pull, roll a die instead. Oh, okay, so this is another physical one. I don't like that. I wish it had a good option that was accessible as far as non-physical play and didn't require actual physical space or specific dexterity skills, because that can be problematic. So that's the appendix. The rest of it goes into the 3 scenarios. I'm not going to go through those because I don't want to spoil anything, but they do have some great things in there as far as questionnaires and stuff. I really like that. That is essentially Dread. It's a really straightforward game. It's really well designed. I wish they had better stuff on safety tools, but I, as a player, do know how to do those things. So I can bring those in, but I feel like games should be responsible for being explicit about those. I would recommend checking out Dread if you have a chance. It is a physical game. It is the Halloween month, so it is super thematic. I don't have any Dread games planned yet, but I'm realizing I should get on that. And yeah, that is Dread in a nutshell. Would recommend. This is a game that I've gotten a lot of enjoyment out. Had some really great moments. I'll share one moment. We're gonna do some storytelling. So I was doing the scenario where there's a bunch of the characters together. Yeah, the game needs something other than a tower, in my opinion, to make it valuable, because like not everyone is comfortable with the Jenga tower. But yeah, so there's that. The story that I want to mention is when we were playing a game. It was the first game of Dread that I played with my group of friends. It was my first game of Dread ever, and the group had this mindset. They had this mindset that they were like, okay, we're playing a role-playing game. We're going to get to the end, and we're going to try and succeed. They wanted to win Dread, which is not something that works so well. We were going into the game. They were like really gung-ho. They're like, okay, let's do this solution. Let's do this. Very systematic. Let's figure out this thing next. Figure out the thing after that. And they got to this one point where my two friends were talking, and they were beginning to realize a sort of sketchy past. And the two of them were talking. They're trying to figure out, okay, how can we escape this place? And my one friend said to the other friend, hey, how did you get here? And the other friend responded and said, oh, I hitchhiked. And the look on my other friend's face when they were like, why? Why did you hitchhike? Why is that a thing that you did? Why did you put that in your backstory? And it was at that moment where the group was just like completely overcome with a sense of dread. Like, okay, this isn't a game where we try and survive and all succeed. This is a game where some terrible things are going to happen, and we're just going to try and do our best. And it was a very cathartic moment where people gave up on survival and were like, okay, this is bad. We need to readjust. It was a really good mood shift in the room that I really liked. Very, very memorable. Also, hello everyone who's joined. I think we're actually going to wrap up. What I'm doing is I like to take these videos. I'm going to try and be uploading them to YouTube. So we'll wrap up here. Thank you all for joining. I hope to do more of these. If y'all have any ideas of games that you would like to see, I think the next one I'm going to look at is Bluebeard's Bride. It is a feminine horror based on using the Powered by the Apocalypse system. I've never played it. I've never read it, so it's going to be a totally fresh look at it. And it's been a game I've been so excited for. I love the artwork in it. I've seen a little bit of it, and I have wanted to take a look at it for so long. So next time, I think we'll do Bluebeard's Bride. Otherwise, I think we're good to go. And thank you, everyone, for jumping in.